26 instead of 46 or 44. And I ran into the needle exchange looking for needles. And once I found it, I also found a host of other things, a lot more than needles. In fact, needles became the secondary aspect of my involvement in the needle exchange. I like to say right now that people like Alan, Donald Grove, Mark Gerst, Ellen, Rosa, Hadassah, who's not here anymore, yes, Mark too, all of the people that I knew at the Needle Exchange 2 years ago changed my life in New York completely. And they gave me something to struggle for here. I think that most of my life has been involved in some type of struggle or another, and that's the way I want it. It's not something that I regret at all. And the Needle Exchange is my struggle now, the user's struggle, I take it to be. I think that the issue, and I thought about this some this week, I live in a shelter, Bellevue Shelter, and I was doing some reading this week. I was reading a book that was a collection of articles from the Washington Post from 1975. Well, that's my era. I mean, I was 25 in 1945. 1975, excuse me. I wasn't 25 and 40. 75. And, you know, at that time, I felt I was going to live forever. I felt I was invulnerable. I felt I was invincible. And reading these articles, and most of the articles are written by young people or written about young people of that time. And yeah, and now looking at the young people of today, I have some sort of gauge to measure things. And I began to realize how truly evanescent life is, how vaporous it is. I mean, 25 years ago, I would have never thought I'd be where I am now. And I don't want to get into regret or any of that kind of stuff. I don't want to get into yesterday when I was young. But what I mean is that there's a kind of, what that book does for me, or did for me this week, was it gave me a gauge to measure where I am. And I have to admit that I do have some fears. I began to think about the whole question of welfare dependency and of collecting SSI and living in a shelter and being 46. And I consider myself a writer, not having written anything except some articles that were published by Harm Reduction Newsletter, but, you know, not having written something that I feel is a definitive statement on my part. And this is, again, what I feel the Needle Exchange does for me. It gives me a place where I can feel the possibility that that can still happen, can happen. And I'm proud of that, and I'm glad of that. And I think that, along with all the other things that we do, that kind of possibility, that kind of giving one a sense of the possible is another beautiful thing that the Needle Exchange does. Let me start to wind down, but at any rate, I'd like to take another cue from Alma, and that is the idea of the user's voice. I think that is a real issue that we're struggling towards. And I think I'm beginning to see it unfold, incrementally, as Mark said. And it's through programs like this, through things like the Peer Educators Group, through things like the I Care, which is a users group that we have formed, which isn't always working as well as it could be, but it's there, it's in place, and it certainly only needs some very dedicated people to come out and join it. And all of the other things that we do there.
definitely attracted a lot of attention. How did everybody else check in? Tell me how it went.
Well, for me, it was a nice experience. We tried to go to the school, right? But they told us they didn't want no signs there, but it was all right. We put some out in the phone booths and you know, the foam. You know about? Yeah. And,
did you go into the other programs like family reunion? And
yeah, all of those.
We went to all of those. Even the dentist. We went to the dentist, and we went to children's stores.
Yeah, good.
We put in 7th Street. We went to the laundromat. We put 2 or 3 in the laundromat. Credit union.
Great.
And we went to the cashier on Houston. And then we went all the way to Abbey Lane. We hit that dentist.
Got back.
What was he doing? Trying to hit me with that shoe? You were trying to hit? Oh, no, he didn't. He said he did not put it there.
He had the gloves on and he took your shoe and went. That was very cute.
Speeches, come here.
So, any other comments, Ricky? How was it for you?
Wonderful. Marcos was a great partner. There were times where I would be talking to some woman and she'd look at me like, I'd call Marcos. So
It's funny.
Right away, we sell as many, give away as many as possible. But there were many people who said, as soon as we walked up to them and said, "Excuse me, man," never mind. I mean, they're so used to the New York solicitation.
New York State.
Right. I mean, excuse me, ma'am. They expect, I don't want no Budweiser. I don't want no. They figured we were gonna sell something, and then when we get it across that this was free. It was, then we get a different, and when they realized what it was, we had some smart guy start telling, I was watching something on television the other day about this polio stuff and exchanges for them to take that, so I think a lot of people are not going to want, I wanted to grab this guy, would you shut up? He had to come out right away with something he saw on TV about how there are two
How
different
did you respond to
types
that,
of
though?
polio. Well, we said, first of all, I agreed with him. I said, yes, there are 2 types of polio vaccines. There's Salk and there's Sabin. And actually what they've done is, and I said what they do is they complement each other. Salk was the first one to come out, and Sabin came out later, and Sabin is actually has become a little bit, it's a little bit more efficient type of vaccine. But I agreed with him, and I said, where'd you see this on television? Which he couldn't remember. And I said, I don't think that's going to... Marcos gave a very good answer to that. He said, even if they don't want to take the polio, there are other shots that they can take. And he said, oh yeah, right. And and this was the explanation that we would give to most of the women. We'd say, if your child has had one, that's all right because there are other ones that they can have, and one woman said, well, what about if the child is over 4? And we said, well, actually, these shots, these vaccinations are supposed to be given on a schedule throughout their infancy, but come on down anyway and bring your child, especially if they've missed 1 or 2 of their childhood immunizations, and perhaps they can still get it. So she said, yeah, and I said, also tell any of your friends. That was our big thing.
Excellent.
Tell your friends, And, but the guy that was telling us about the polio thing, he was obviously misinformed, and right away he was trying to give some kind of...
But you handled it well. So
right, he was trying to give some reason to he was trying to stir up some kind of
big thing, like,
right, some kind of confusion and rebellion among the people. And what I want to tell him is that, look, buddy, people have been getting polio shots. I got polio shots, and I'm okay. Right.
Sorry.
And his point was that some woman had gotten a polio vaccine and her child caught polio, which Marcos made another good point, and that was that's why we stress bring your immunization card, because if the children are given duplicates of the shots, maybe that might be a way in which there could be some kind of a reaction to the immunization. Oh, we're great.
You were so ahead.
Boy, we were walking down. We didn't get any problems except for one jerk security guard who must have just been elevated to his position, and therefore he was acting on the security guard Bible book.
You mean,
right,
71.
on 7, yeah. He was acting on it in such implicit. I mean, he was not deviating one iota from what they taught him in security guard school. And so right away he says, "That's solicitation, young man. What are we soliciting? You know, we're trying to get people to come in and have free immunization. Free means it's not solicitation. By definition, that can't be solicitation. Solicitation is when you are trying to get somebody to do something for money."
And what he told us was, too, he said, and we don't want your guys in the lobby or
Right, we're not even
outside
supposed to be in the school.
street to give these things
Yeah,
out.
64.
71.
The school.
So we said, all right, you want to be funny? We put a lot of signs over there and telephone and stuff like that so people could see it when we walking out of the street.
How was it for you, Chris? How was it for you, Chris?
I had a good time.
We want clothes.
I guess you did. You were chasing every good-looking woman walking up the street.
We're doing the closure. Let's do the closure first.
I put a lot up in store windows and stuff to some of the merchants and stuff like that. And I've handed out, you know, when I ran out of whatever, I handed out the other thing, the long sheet as well. And you know, it went well. I had a good response to it. And what helped me, I guess, was like, you know, I got this, you know, I say, me hablo español, no mucho grande, hablo, you know.
You spoke Spanish?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah, but you helped.
Yeah, and so...
That entertained them so much they had to say.
You speak a little bit Spanish, right?
And when I approached them, I said, hola, señora.
Yeah, good, yeah.
What you mean by hablo mucho grande?
Mucho big stuff, huh?
Then he had to whirl around again. So, hold on just a second. I'll be right with you now. Just a second.
Very good.
Yeah, good. You're very good, yeah.
Come here. Let Raquel get a shot of you in the weed.
So
Come here.
I was there, and then I was able to get
I'll do it
everybody.
when
That dog doesn't want
I'm running out of battery.
we put it on.
That's when I learned.
Rafa, how was it for you?
Oh, very good, good.
I was ready to go.
Feedback. Go ahead.
Very good. Because, you know, I was,
I'm gonna get a haircut.
I mean, Caroline, we would say, and then Caroline speaks to the people, you know, in English, when I see someone can speak in Spanish, so I come out and start explaining to her in Spanish.
You're a good lead man, too. You used to go up ahead and go, look, the clown is coming, and we're going to do this.
And let me tell you, you try to run in them clown shoes.
Yeah, because
But that is pretty cool, isn't it?
you know, so I was explaining to the people, you know, especially the mother with the kids, I said, listen, tomorrow, you know, you can bring, you know, your shower, you know, in case there's, you know, you miss something, you know, vaccination, go there and you
That was
can get it.
good, the daycare center.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
really nice.
Oh,
I'm happy, you know, to help more in case they need me again. I go out.
That's right.
Anytime.
Carol, I don't know if she's still over there. Carol.
Carol Ramsey.
Yeah.
She wasn't there.
No.
It made me feel
That's the
good.
only place they didn't let us take.
Yeah.
It made me feel good.
So you know her. You know Carol's very nice.
So how was it for you?
Oh, this is really so
Tripping up my mind.
gave me a good warm feeling for the community. I think it's going to be a great day tomorrow. Happy to have the name of the Lower East Side Harm Reduction Center out there with this. People knowing about everything that all the services that are provided by the Harm Reduction Center. And I just feel so good to be part of this. Thank you for letting me be a part of this effort.
Thank you. It was fun.
It's really quite
If it wasn't because of your project, we wouldn't have done this today. So we appreciate it, too, to give us the opportunity to do this. And I know that Rose was having a wonderful time.
unnatural. The teamwork, that's what it was.
It was great.
Personified.
Very proud of all of you guys.
Peaches, come here.
You did a really good job.
You know you want to do it.
Oh my God.
Okay, Mom.
Okay,
See you
Mom.
tomorrow, right?
Or this is the peaches that you know.
Monday? Okay, Mom, take it out.
You kiss me.
No, they didn't necessarily become, you know, open-hearted and all that, and then fling open the door. But they were not at all hostile towards us, especially when we made it clear that this was for children. And I throw in the little codicil that it doesn't matter whether you're an illegal immigrant or whatever, as long as you know, have even if you don't have a immunization card, come anyway. This is free. We're not asking any questions and all of that, you know. I didn't want to stress that too much, though, you know, because I think that most of the people we dealt with were very much legal immigrants, and
But
some
also
people.
the thing was that we were talking about it in terms of the flyer, that it would have been good to add a little something of that, because there are quite a few people who
There
are
you go,
scared
and
to access
who might be frightened off by that.
Yeah.
Marcos also was good at making another point, which was when I get some of the women that would say they'd obviously have a bunch of little kids with them, and I'd say, this is for children. I'd say, no, and I'd say, when I come back to Marcos, I said, well, how could somebody turn down something? And he said, but no, they probably have insurance already, and their children were probably up to date.
Right, some mention that.
Right. So, you know, for us to assume that just
A lot of
because
the ones we
person
saw said they didn't.
Right. Well, we got a lot of women who said, no, that's okay, my kids are up to date, blah, blah, blah. And it was like, for us to assume just because there was a woman with a crate full of kids that she needed immunization.
Lots of people do have them up to date. Many others don't. So we're here for those who don't.
We had to take that into consideration.
But Ricky, one of the things, like when I got that type of response, I said, well, hey, share it with somebody. You know.
Now that was a good point. We did a little bit of that too, of giving things to people.
So you got a friend, you know, here, share it with them. You know, that's what I did.
Yeah.
Do it right in their hand.
Another thing we found too is you didn't have to look for always look for young women.
No.
We gave out a number of them, older women who showed much more interest and were very attentive to what we were saying, and then asked a lot of questions and this kind of thing. So I started thinking, shoot for the older women.
And let's not forget the fathers.
Mm-hmm.
Brothers. Men,
That's right.
Men are very involved with their children too.
We had a guy, in fact, who stopped us, and he was one of the few people who actually stopped us and asked us for him, and then began to ask questions. Thank you, Rose.
But I did that with a lot of the young guys I know. I said, yeah, use it, Daddy. Here.
That's right. They have young kids.
They said, oh, I said, that's it. They said, oh, okay, you know, it's like, you know,
make me look stupid.
with no big fanfare, though. They're like, oh, thanks, you know.
Because I remember me, my mother told me for my last shot, I think it was a measles.
They ain't new
At 5 years old. I think that's
That
normal,
is exactly.
right?
Yes.
That's about
They ain't
it.
new no more.
Wow.
What a memory.
Do they don't still do smallpox, right?
No.
Weiss, and I am a peer educator at the Harm Reduction Center and the Lower East Side Needle Exchange to C43 and at 223 2nd Street. We are and have been an organization dedicated to harm reduction. I'll get into what the definition of harm reduction is in a moment. For the past 5, 6 years, let me say, we are growing bigger and stronger and are at this point as strong and vibrant as we ever have been. In fact, I'd say we're at our zenith right now. The purpose of my being here this afternoon is to deliver a presentation. In fact, the aspect of harm reduction that I am presenting this afternoon is harm reduction, and I'm going to abbreviate reduction, harm reduction, and ambivalence. The important point in this production, I think, is ambivalence. So let us get into that. But first, let us get into the definition of what harm reduction is. And I'm not going to go into it in depth, because I think that harm reduction is something that, in fact, we can be rather ambivalent about in the definition. We certainly can get into a number of different definitions. It's not as though harm reduction were as clearly defined as, say, quantum physics or any scientific issue. It's not a science. But let me give at least my definition and make it rather. I'm striving for brevity here. Harm reduction, as I understand it, is, and I think as we as an organization strive to be, harm reduction is the way in which we as an organization seek to lessen or diminish the amount of harm that is done to people who are addicted, who are drug users, and who are unfortunately oppressed or in some way involved with the criminal justice system and the drug enforcement system of this country. In this country, unfortunately, the drug enforcement, the official system, that is to say, the component of the United States government that deals with people who use drugs that are what is the term that we use? Excuse me for a moment. Drugs that are controlled, that is the term. Controlled substances, unfortunately, excuse me for a moment, and this is a very big component of our system also, because we don't have millions and millions of dollars to spend for big places to house ourselves. So unfortunately, we have people coming in and seemingly disrupting, but it's not disrupting. What it is it's the transaction of very important business that we have, and that's necessary, and there's no way to get around it. Unless, of course, we were given grants from some charitable organization who saw the importance of harm reduction. But let me get back to the point. In this country, unfortunately, the reaction to, or the way in which drug enforcement is done, that is to say, the way in which substances which are controlled in this country are treated, and people who utilize those substances are treated, is from a criminal standpoint, absolutely, as opposed to from a medical standpoint. as they are done in certain European countries and other countries. These drugs are controlled substances in this country. Let's be very clear and flat out and not beat around the bush. We're talking about substances like heroin, cocaine, benzodiazepine, barbiturates, as some people say, any substance that is mind-altering or mood-altering. These substances have been declared almost from the beginning of the 20th century as controlled. Control simply means that you can't utilize these drugs without a prescription from a doctor, a legal prescription from a doctor. If you don't have that prescription, then you are considered a criminal. If you transfer any of these substances, you are considered a drug trafficker, and the penalty for that is even worse than if you simply have the drugs for yourself. Now, we feel, when I say we, that is to say, the organization that I am involved with feel that this is the incorrect method of dealing with this situation. That controlled substances and people who use controlled substances should be dealt with from a medical standpoint as opposed to from a criminal standpoint. So therefore, that captures the quintessence of harm reduction. Harm reduction is finding the way of the least method of harm being done to people who are involved in dangerous practices. That may sound, on the surface, rather, how should I put it? Rather, it might sound wrong. Why should we try to get people who are involving themselves in dangerous practices? Why should we be concerned with trying to minimize the harm that are done to these people? If they want to involve themselves in dangerous practices, well then, the consequences are their fault, and that's it. You know, if they're willing to take the chance of involving themselves in dangerous practices, whatever consequences accrue as a result of that, that's too bad. They knew when they got involved that there were dangerous consequences, and so therefore, too bad. That is the proverbial or the general view. But our view is that, number one, dangerous drugs and people who involve themselves in utilizing dangerous drugs have a much deeper and a much larger purpose, a much larger and a much deeper involvement than simply the fact that people want to use dangerous substances. It's not as though people go out and say, well, this is dangerous, I want to try it. There is a much more profound aspect to the use of mood-altering, mind-altering, dangerous chemicals than simply that people are involved in that because they want to take a chance. Now this is a very involved discussion, and it's not my discussion, so I can't digress that much into it. But let me again reiterate the point that we as an organization feel that for whatever reason people get involved in dangerous mood and mind-altering chemicals, that it certainly does not bespeak a civilized nation whose only response to that kind of behavior is to clamp them down in jail, throw them in prison, put them in with the rapists and murderers and the rest of the criminals. To me, and I think to my organization, that bespeaks an uncivilized nation, certainly not a civilized nation, and that the obverse would be an indication of a civilized nation. To try to understand psychologically what propels and motivates people into this kind of behavior, and to treat these people as medical, I dare say, psychological cases, and to be concerned with trying to reduce the harm that these people do to themselves. So, that is a encapsulated definition of harm reduction. Harm reduction is seeking out and trying to reduce the harm that those users of dangerous and controlled substances do to themselves. There are also a number of other things that people do to themselves that we try to reduce the harm to, but specifically in that vein right now. And certainly this gives us a very large area to work with, and probably I think in the future will be very useful in a number of ways. Anyway, let me get back to my subject. Harm reduction and ambivalence. I like to speak this from 1, 2, 3 ways, because I only have so much time. The first way I like to treat harm reduction and ambivalence is from the personal area, and that is to say, I like to personalize it. Myself. I am 46 years old, and I was involved early in my life, in my 20s and on, in the so-called civil rights movement. Civil rights movement, black liberation. You know, we all are familiar with this, I think. The Black Panther Party, so on and so forth. The struggle to end the war in Vietnam, and I think that the struggle for the ending of the war in Vietnam sort of melded together the struggle of black people and the radical left, as it was commonly known, that was most often made up of young white people. That was a struggle that there was no doubt in my mind that I needed to be involved in. And it was as though I was born into the struggle. I was certainly propelled into it by my mother, who was an ardent member of CORE and the NAACP, so on and so forth. There was no ambivalence on my part about that, except how radical I would get. Now, what I'm contrasting is my involvement in the civil rights struggle and my involvement in the harm reduction movement, in that though I certainly feel that there is a need for me to be in the harm reduction struggle or movement, I certainly feel that I'm qualified to be in that I have been a IDU, which is an intravenous drug user, for the last 25 years. I don't feel the same, or at least I did not feel the same kind of passionate need, or the same kind of passionate commitment requirement for me to be in the harm reduction struggle. It wasn't as though I woke up in the morning and I said, what do I have to do today for the harm reduction struggle? The question was that there was always that escape door. It was as though I could wake up and say, well, I'm going to quit using drugs today. I'm going to go into treatment, and I'm going to go to California, and bye-bye harm reduction people. Bye-bye Lower East Side New Exchange. It wasn't as though if I left and went to California, I'd be called an Uncle Tom, because because I'm no longer working with the harm reduction movement. I could as easily, at least it appears that it would be as easy for me to step off from the harm reduction movement as it would be for me to step off, let's say, from a job I didn't like. That is an ambivalence that I struggle with myself. I have struggled with and still struggle with. And because of my requirements of time, I won't go into it anymore. But that is one issue of ambivalence. The second issue of ambivalence, I think, is the issue of users themselves. That, and very similar to what I just got finished saying, that there's always the issue of, if I clean myself up, if I go into treatment and get cleaned up, do I have a responsibility, do I have a commitment to the harm reduction user movement? Can I just clean myself up and go to California? And why California is always picked as the place to go to, I don't know, but in our history it's always been the place to run to, California. But whatever. If not California, then Mexico then, or Canada. But at any rate, my point is that the ambivalence is that there's not necessarily a commitment, a blood-strong commitment, a bone-deep commitment to be involved in the harm reduction movement. That there is always that backdoor way of escaping out of the harm reduction movement and saying, look, I clean myself up, man, I'm not even involved with that stuff anymore. I don't want to be dealing with them junkies. I'm done with them. I'm not a junkie anymore, so I'm through with it, you know. And I think that's ambivalent. I think also that the same kind of ambivalence among users is that feeling that what good will it do for me? That in fact it promotes or creates a situation that is dangerous for me if I continue to work with them after cleaning myself up, because there is the danger of me getting re-involved, and I'm trying to stay away from it. And of course, in all of the, or in a lot of the treatment programs, the idea is once you clean yourself up, remove yourself from people and places that still use and do. Am I right or wrong, Ilya? That's a very big part. So there's an ambivalence there. There's almost what I'm trying to say is there's almost a institutional ambivalence. That is to say, an ambivalence built into the concepts and philosophies that characterize how you can clean yourself up, so to speak. Okay, the last type of ambivalence, I think, is the ambivalence of supporters, and that is to say that people who support the harm reduction movement are ambivalent about just how much they are willing to support the harm reduction movement, and certainly just how much they are willing to support radical harm reduction. For instance, when you get a harm reduction person who says, I am the director of a needle exchange program and I treat drugs, that scares off a lot of people who would be willing to support you. And after all, everything needs this. Okay? So the question is, there's ambivalence on the part of corporate supporters or whatever you want to call them, but it's the people who put dollars into our pockets or into our bank account, or who fund us so that we can pay the salaries of people who are going to work to keep these places open. And there's an ambivalence there. And the ambivalence is not just with them, but the ambivalence is with us in terms of how radical are we going to be? How much are we going to publicly say? How much are we going to jeopardize our corporate sponsors in order to touch base with the users who we are reaching out to? I think, in essence, that is what ambivalence is. Ambivalence is a question, and I think that certainly harm reduction provides
a perfect stomping ground for ambivalence. Hopefully, we can get past that ambivalence. Thank you. Next is now.
Tommy.
Excuse me? Only here. We are always first and foremost and unique. We always start things and everybody follows. That's why we are the Lower East Side Eagles. What do you like about doing your work? I think that what compels me and what drives me and what has attracted me to the Lower East Side Needle Exchange and the Harm Reduction Center has been, and I wasn't kidding when I said that uniqueness, that kind of first with the most, so to speak. I don't want to use cliches because we've been accused of that, but certainly when I came back to New York, what I found at the Lower East Side Needle Exchange was something that I had never found anywhere else in this country. And I mean, I've done some traveling around this country and also into Canada and down, and so around. And as a user, I was overwhelmed by the kind of warmth that I received here, the kind of understanding, the kind of acceptance that I found here that I had never found anywhere else in this country. For my drug use and for my substance use. It wasn't called substance abuse, number one, and the use was accepted without question, totally, completely. That's not to say that I was encouraged to use or that people said to me, go out and get whacked and ruined and come on back and we'll pay you some money just to do that and you can go out and do it over and over again. No. Let's be realistic. There was a very lucid, coherent program here that accepted me where I was, but also encouraged me to try to make the necessary changes in my life that would allow me to, number one, fit into this society and to survive. There are points that I need to make about how IV drug users